Have you ever trusted someone with the two people you love most, only to discover they chose a simple beauty appointment over your children's safety? If you think nothing could hurt more than that, stay with me, because what happened after I woke up from surgery changed my family forever. 14 missed calls. That was the first thing I saw when I opened my eyes in the recovery room. My vision was blurry, my mouth still tasted like anesthesia, and a sharp pain burned beneath the bandages on my right side. I reached for my phone with trembling fingers, expecting a message from my husband or maybe my parents telling me the kids were fine. Instead, the screen was filled with missed calls from my next-door neighbor. My heart started pounding long before I knew why. Before I tell you what those calls meant, if you enjoy powerful true-life family stories with unforgettable endings, take a second to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read as many comments as I can, and I'd love to know where you're joining me from. Now let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Whitney Walsh. I'm 32 years old, a pediatric nurse at Ridgeview Community Hospital, where I've spent the last 8 years caring for sick children. Long shifts, overtime, sleepless nights, it was exhausting, but I loved my job. My husband, Marcus, worked as a physical therapist. Calm under pressure, endlessly patient, the kind of man everyone trusted without hesitation. Together we had 2 amazing children. 7-year-old Oliver had the biggest heart of anyone I'd ever known. 5-year-old Sophie could brighten an entire room with one smile. They were my whole world. Marcus happened to be in Denver that week for a professional conference he had planned months earlier. Normally he would never leave during something important, but my surgery was supposed to be routine. A simple gallbladder procedure. A few hours at the hospital, then back home before dinner. Everything had been planned perfectly. Or at least, I thought it had. Growing up, I had become the dependable one in the family. Whenever someone needed help, my phone rang. Need a ride? Call Whitney. Need someone to babysit? Call Whitney. Need someone to organize the family gathering while everyone else enjoyed themselves? Whitney would take care of it. But whenever something wonderful happened in my own life, somehow nobody had time. It took years before I stopped expecting anything different. So asking my parents to watch Oliver and Sophie for just 4 hours didn't seem like a big request. I called my mother several days before surgery. Mom, can you and Dad keep the kids Tuesday morning until I'm discharged? Her answer came without hesitation. Of course, sweetheart. Bring them early. We'll make pancakes. Don't worry about a thing. Those words wrapped around me like a blanket. Don't worry about a thing. The night before surgery I packed everything carefully. Extra clothes. Toothbrushes. Oliver's favorite reading book. Sophie's stuffed rabbit she refused to sleep without. I even prepared a folder with emergency contacts, insurance information, allergies, meal schedules, every detail a pediatric nurse could possibly think of. Looking back now, that ordinary folder would become the most important piece of evidence in my entire life. Tuesday morning arrived. At exactly 6:45, I pulled into my parents' driveway. Dad greeted us at the front door while Mom already had a frying pan heating on the stove. Everything looked normal. Safe. Familiar. I hugged both kids goodbye. Sophie wrapped her tiny arms around my leg, holding tighter than usual. I'll be back before dinner, I whispered, kissing her forehead. She nodded, but something in her eyes made me hesitate. Just then my mother's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. She glanced at the screen for only a second before quietly turning it face down. Who was that? I asked casually. Oh, just Amber, she answered with a smile. Nothing important. I believed her. I handed over the folder, waved goodbye, and drove toward Ridgeview Community Hospital, completely convinced my children were in the safest place they could possibly be. I had no idea that, within just a few hours, one decision made inside that house would destroy 32 years of trust. The drive to Ridgeview Community Hospital felt strangely peaceful. I'd driven that route hundreds of times as a nurse, walking through the employee entrance with a coffee in one hand and my ID badge in the other. But that morning was different. I wasn't reporting for work, I was the patient. Inside the pre-op room, everything smelled of disinfectant and fresh linens. A nurse I knew from another floor smiled warmly as she inserted my four. "Nervous?" she asked. "A little," I admitted with a laugh. Before they wheeled me into surgery, I sent Marcus one last text. "Kids are with mom and dad. Everything's set. Love you." His reply came almost instantly. "Love you too. Call me when you wake up." Those were the last comforting words I read before the anesthesia pulled me under. The anesthesiologist adjusted my blanket and spoke calmly. "You'll start feeling sleepy in just a moment." I stared at the ceiling tiles above me, trying to distract myself by counting the faint water stains near the corner. 1, 2, 3. Then Sophie's face flashed through my mind. The way she'd clung to my leg that morning. The way my mother's phone had buzzed, and how quickly she'd hidden the screen. For a split second, an uneasy feeling settled in my chest. I almost asked the nurse for my phone. Almost. But then I reminded myself, they're with my parents. They'll be fine. Warmth spread through my arm as the medication entered my fore. The lights above me blurred. Voices faded. Everything went black. For hours later, I opened my eyes to the sound of monitors beeping and nurses moving around the recovery room. Pain shot through my side as I reached for my phone. The screen lit up. 14 missed calls. Every single one. From my neighbor, Mrs. Doyle. And before I could even understand why she had called so many times, I opened her first text message, and the words on that screen made my blood run cold. Mrs. Doyle never called unless something truly mattered. 14 missed calls meant only one thing. Something had gone terribly wrong. My hands were still shaking from the anesthesia as I opened her first message. "Whitney, honey, your children are with me. Your parents left. Please call when you can." I stared at the screen, convinced I had read it wrong. Left? Left where? I opened the next text. "Oliver is trying to comfort Sophie. She's been crying." Then another. "Please call me. I'm getting worried." The room suddenly felt smaller. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard it hurt more than my surgical incision. I pressed Mrs. Doyle's number. She answered before the first ring had finished. "Oh, thank goodness, Whitney. What happened?" I whispered, already afraid of the answer. Mrs. Doyle took a slow breath. "I was working in my front yard around 11:30 when I saw your parents drive away. At first I thought they were running a quick errand. Then I noticed Oliver and Sophie sitting alone on your parents' porch. My entire body went numb." Sophie was crying, she continued softly. Oliver had his arm around her, trying to keep her calm. "He told me your dad said they'd only be gone for an hour." I shut my eyes. "How long were they alone?" "I can't be certain, but by the time I brought them into my house, your parents had already been gone for quite a while. A 7-year-old boy had spent the afternoon protecting his little sister because the adults who promised to protect them had disappeared." Tears burned behind my eyes. "Are they safe?" "They're safe now," Mrs. Doyle replied gently. "Oliver even made Sophie a peanut butter sandwich. He's a remarkable little boy." I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breathing. Then I ended the call. And dialed the one number I never imagined I'd be afraid to call. My mother. The phone rang once. Twice. On the third ring, my mother answered with the same warm, cheerful voice she always used, as if it were just another ordinary afternoon. "Hi, sweetheart. How did the surgery go?" For a second, I couldn't even speak. I stared at the hospital ceiling, trying to understand how someone could sound so relaxed while my children had been left alone. Finally, I forced the words out. "Where are Oliver and Sophie?" There was a brief silence. Just long enough for me to know she was thinking of an answer. "Oh. Mrs. Doyle already called you?" My grip tightened around the phone. "Mom, where are my children?" She sighed, almost as if I were overreacting. "Whitney, calm down. They're fine." "No," I said firmly. "Tell me where they are." "They're with Mrs. Doyle now." My heartbeat pounded in my ears. "Why?" Another pause. Then she finally admitted it. "Amber called this morning. Her hairstylist had an opening at the last minute, and you know how impossible it is to get an appointment with Ricardo." I blinked. Surely I hadn't heard that correctly. "So, you left my children alone?" "They were sleeping when we left," she interrupted quickly. "Your father checked on them before we drove away." "They weren't sleeping," I snapped. "Mrs. Doyle found them sitting on the porch." Sophie was crying. For the first time, my mother's confidence cracked. "Well, Mrs. Doyle lives right next door. We knew someone would notice if they needed anything." I felt every muscle in my body tighten. "You hoped someone would notice?" "It wasn't a big deal, Whitney." "Not a big deal." Those 4 words echoed louder than the heart monitor beside my bed. "My children are 5 and 7 years old," I said slowly. "I trusted you with their lives. They were perfectly safe." "No, they were lucky." Silence. Then my mother spoke again, this time sounding irritated. "You always make everything bigger than it is." I closed my eyes. Suddenly, memories I had buried for years began rushing back. My science fair, where my parents never showed up because Amber had dance practice. My nursing school graduation, where they arrived late after helping Amber with another emergency. Oliver's first soccer game, where Grandma promised to come, and never did. Sophie's birthday party, where Amber spent the entire afternoon staring at her phone instead of speaking to her niece. Every disappointment. Every excuse. Every time I convinced myself it wasn't worth making an issue out of it. This wasn't one careless mistake. This was the same story. Repeated for 32 years. Only this time, it involved my children. I opened my eyes and spoke as calmly as I ever had. "Mom, listen carefully." "I'm listening." "You will never be alone with Oliver or Sophie again." Her breathing stopped for a second. "Whitney, don't be ridiculous. I'm done making excuses for you. You're overreacting because you're emotional after surgery." "No," I replied quietly. "I'm finally seeing the truth." Before she could argue again, I ended the call. The room fell silent except for the steady beeping of the monitor. I looked down at my phone. A message from Marcus had just appeared. "How are the kids?" I stared at those 4 simple words. He still believed they had spent the afternoon safely with my parents. He had no idea that everything about our family was about to change forever. Marcus called the moment I told him the truth. He didn't interrupt. He didn't make excuses. He listened. When I finished, the line stayed silent for several seconds before he finally spoke. "Our children were left alone while you were in surgery?" "Yes. I'm coming home." I wanted to tell him to finish his conference, but the words never came. For the first time in my life, I didn't want to carry everything by myself. That evening, Mrs. Doyle walked Oliver and Sophie across the lawn to our house. Sophie ran into my arms, careful not to squeeze too hard because she knew Mommy had a boo-boo. Oliver stood quietly beside me. "I stayed with Sophie the whole time," he said softly. I knelt down despite the pain and wrapped both of them in the biggest hug I could manage. "I'm so proud of you," I whispered. That night, after the kids were asleep, I made 6 decisions that would change our lives forever. I changed every lock on the house. I removed my parents from the school pickup list. I updated our emergency contacts. I rewrote my will. I changed every legal document that gave them authority over my children. And I promised myself one thing. No one who chooses convenience over my children's safety will ever have that chance again. 2 weeks later, my parents showed up at my front door for Sunday dinner. My mother smiled and pulled her old key from her purse. It slid into the lock. But it didn't turn. When I opened the door, I handed her copies of every document I'd changed. She looked at me in disbelief. "You shut us out?" I met her eyes without anger. "No. You shut yourselves out the day you left my children alone." I closed the door. The new lock clicked into place. For the first time in 32 years, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. Because sometimes protecting your children doesn't mean opening another door. It means having the courage to close one forever. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs the reminder that protecting your peace, and your children, is never the wrong decision.